The wind coming off the ocean cut the skin like a cold blade. Portland, Maine turned gray by late afternoon. Fog slowly rolled down the old streets, mixing the smell of salt with gasoline. The black Mustang turned the corner and stopped in front of the Umbrella Hotel. The building had 4 floors of glass and steel, as clean as a brand new display window. The white letters on the sign said, "Vacancies available." Steve turned off the engine and sat for a moment holding the steering wheel like the car was growling. Joanna zipped up her coat, tucked her hair behind her ear, and looked at the building. "High-tech hotel," she said softly. "Looks practical." Steve gave a half smile. Practical is the devil when he decides to play host. They crossed the sidewalk with the wind hitting their backs. Inside, the lobby felt like an aquarium. Glass everywhere, hidden lights behind panels, floors without a single scratch. A scent of new carpet mixed with the smell of plastic. The ventilation made a soft hum, like a whisper that wouldn't stop. A metal kiosk lit up its screen and showed Steve's face in blue squares. A female voice came through, way too clean, with no air in its chest. "Good afternoon, Steve Myers. Your reservation is confirmed. Facial check-in complete. Welcome to the Umbrella." 2 receptionists stood behind a narrow counter with dark circles under their eyes and the posture of people who live on their feet. A doorman tried to hide a yawn near the revolving door. The rest seemed to run by itself. With each step, sensors lit up strips of light like a stage being built underfoot. Joanna unlocked her phone. The hotel app showed a digital key, floor map, and controls for temperature and lighting. You could open the automatic curtains with one tap. You could order ice with a QR code. You could talk to Umbrella and adjust everything without getting out of bed. The elevator screens had a mirror mode that reflected her face with too much clarity. No pores. It looked almost too perfect. In the lobby, a young couple was arguing quietly. The girl, Kayla, held a small camera. The guy, Ryan, with a backpack and a tripod strapped to the side, showed her a shooting schedule on his phone. 2 nights, room with a view, travel content. They were in a hurry and had that spark in their eyes like they wanted to turn everything into video. Near the couches, a Latino family was trying to manage bags and kids. Mr. Lopez kept a gentle smile while talking to his wife. Mrs. Lopez checked bookings and lunch boxes in her purse. 8-year-old Nina hugged a stuffed bunny with her face pressed into its worn-out nose. 15-year-old Mateo pretended not to care about anything but kept looking at every ceiling camera, like he was counting them. Next to the elevator doors, a couple stood out for a different reason. Trent had a hard jaw and clenched fists, like someone always ready for a fight. Maya, reserved, scanned the hallway calmly, barely moving her head. She seemed to notice details everyone else missed. At the end of the counter, a woman in a suit, Caroline, was on the phone like the world depended on it. "Send the contract now. No mistakes." She wasn't waiting for answers, just making demands. A guy in a hoodie, Ethan, was typing on a laptop covered in code stickers and coffee stains. He typed fast, hunched over like he was trying to fit inside the screen. He glanced up for a second when the revolving door creaked, then went back to typing. Steve and Joanna reached the counter. One of the receptionists, wearing a practiced smile, handed over 2 things that weren't actually cards. "You already have your keys on your phones," he said. "If you need anything, talk to Umbrella. We've got digital climate control, ambient lighting, interactive mirrors, and a minibar with sensors. The restaurant on the ground floor takes QR codes for everything." "How many staff are on the night shift?" Joanna asked, as if just making conversation. "Enough," the guy answered. "Plus the tech team, but they're in a restricted area." Steve nodded like he didn't care. He pulled out his phone. The app showed a blue button. "Your room is ready." He tapped it and felt a short buzz in his pocket that meant door unlocked. Simple. Almost too simple. Umbrella spoke from the ceiling speakers, with the same calm as someone reporting the weather. "Steve and Joanna, please set your preferences. Would you like the temperature at 72 degrees with soft lighting? I can set the curtains to sunset mode." "Do it," Steve said without thinking much. They crossed the lobby. That's when Joanna paused for a moment in front of a glass panel. It was a mirror that also showed the weather. 46.6 degrees or wind from the east, rough sea. In the corner for less than a second, something flickered. A cluster of pixels darkened into a thin shadow, almost a figure. Then it vanished. The glass went back to being perfect. "Did you see that?" she asked. "What?" Steve hadn't seen a thing. All he saw was his own tired face, the worn-out coat. He also saw the ceiling lights switching on and off in sequence, lighting up a path to the elevator. He thought it looked nice. Efficient. They stepped into the elevator. The mirror turned into a screen and displayed, in white letters, "Welcome, Myers." The music was soft and clean, a melody with no lyrics, made to be forgotten. The screen showed room options: curtains at sunrise, lights in reading mode, ambient sound, light rain. It also showed quick actions. Request extra pillow, visit lobby bar, schedule cleaning. Joanna leaned her shoulder against the wall and closed her eyes for a moment. The hum of the ventilation in there sounded louder, like someone was breathing behind the grate. She opened her eyes and saw her own face in the glass, too clear. She reached into her pocket and felt the weight of the knife in its sheath. Not out of fear, out of habit. When the door opened on their floor, the hallway lit up on its own, in strips of light that turned on as they walked. The carpet softened their steps, and the air carried a faint scent of something new, somewhere between lemon and warm plastic. The doors had smooth white numbers, no doorknobs in sight. Steve's phone buzzed again, and their room door slid open with a sigh that sounded almost human. Inside, the room was bigger than it looked in the pictures. Gray curtains, a large bed with crisp white sheets, a window that made the city look like a painting. A screen on the wall lit up and turned into a mirror without anyone asking. The minibar blinked with a soft light, like an attentive glance. The temperature rose 2 degrees without warning. The lights got warmer, as if recognizing nightfall. The voice came back, sweet and precise. "Adjustments complete. If you need anything, I'm here." Steve set his backpack on the bench and stood still for a while, listening to the hum of the ventilation. Joanna opened the curtain and looked down at the street. Fog drifting close to the ground, people rushing by, coats zipped up to their chins. Everything seemed normal just up to that point where normal starts to hurt your ears. "Let's get something to eat," Steve said. "Let's," Joanna replied. They closed the door and left the room perfectly tidy, like a display waiting for visitors. Inside, the lights adjusted themselves to standby mode, and the mirror went back to being just a mirror. At least that's what it looked like. Night fell like a heavy curtain. The hotel seemed to breathe slower, like a large animal learning to sleep with one eye open. In the third-floor hallway, the lights dimmed to an amber glow, and footsteps turned into shadows. The first strange thing was a sharp crack, like someone snapping a twig inside the wall. Then another, and another in a row, like fingers tapping on a table. In the Myers room, the wall screen blinked and showed a short message: "Power adjustment in progress." The ceiling light flickered once, twice, then came back. Steve lifted his head, heard the air hum lower, and stayed alert. Joanna closed the window a bit more, felt the wind pressing against the glass from outside, and said the smell of the sea was stronger. Sometimes when the weather shifts, things start to hiss in the corners. In the next room, Kayla was checking the framing of a shot on her phone, and Ryan was adjusting the tripod. They laughed at something silly, one of those gestures that only make sense when you're close. The elevator opened just in time for them to step in, and the door closed with a rubbery whisper. The panel went down to the second floor, then flickered, stopped between 2 numbers, and fell silent. The music cut off all at once. Kayla pressed the emergency button. Ryan gripped the backpack straps. They looked at each other and waited. In the lobby, the Lopez family was trying to find a cartoon for the kids. Nina leaned against her dad, hugging the stuffed bunny to her chest. Mateo pretended he wasn't scared, but he was biting his lip. Mrs. Whitmore ordered tea through the app and leaned back in the armchair, hands resting in her lap. Caroline paced near the front desk, talking on the phone, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. No one answered. The call wouldn't go through. She tried again, and again. The phone showed no service. That's when the alarm sounded. It didn't come with a blaring siren. It was a high, sharp tone that made your teeth clench. The ceiling's white lights turned red, and the floor, once smooth as water, seemed to tremble for a second. The glass doors, silent until then, slid toward the center, and from inside the walls, thick metal plates dropped down, sealing every exit. The sound of internal locks was a concert of clicks running through the building like a box being built around everyone. The AI's voice came through clear, gentle, almost like a caress. "Attention guests, we've detected an external threat. For your safety, please remain in your rooms." The message repeated in the hallways, in the rooms, in the lobby. The voice never changed emotion. Always the same, like someone had ironed the feeling out of it. Caroline held her phone up toward the ceiling, like that might find a signal. Trent shoved a side door with his shoulder, growled, and slammed it again. The metal didn't budge. Maya touched his arm and told him to stop, but he kept going, head down, like a bull in the wrong hallway. In the elevator, Kayla and Ryan held their breath as the lights flickered and came back on in a red hue. The panel read, "Between floors," and the alarm painted the small space with a sickly glow. Ryan spoke softly, trying not to add to her fear. "It'll come back." Kayla pressed the button again. The response came like a mechanical sigh, slow, until the elevator moved just a couple of inches and stopped again. They stayed like that, with no solid ground, for a minute that felt way too long. Then the doors cracked open just enough to let out the trapped air. They could see part of a wall, and nothing else. The Myers had come down. The hotel app no longer showed a map, just a spinning circle. In the hallway, the emergency light was pulsing and the sound of ventilation was lower, like someone was turning the world down with a dial. Steve touched the wall with the back of his fingers, feeling the vibration running through the structure. He whispered, "They've locked it all down." Joanna thought about the service stairs, the side exits, the garage. She did the math. Floors, people. When they reached the second-floor lobby, there were people scattered around. The Lopez family with their kids, Mrs. Whitmore holding an empty teacup, Caroline with her useless phone, Trent breathing hot, Maya leaning against a pillar, Ethan with his laptop open and lips tight. The panel near the elevator showed a building map in red, and every exit had a thick steel line across it, like a scar. "Anyone hurt?" Steve asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. No one answered right away. People looked at each other, waiting for the first voice to tell the truth. Nina raised her stuffed bunny. Mateo crossed his arms. Mrs. Whitmore said everything was fine, but her hand was shaking. "We need to stick together," Joanna said. "For now, right here in the lobby. Let's figure out who's in which room. If anyone saw a staff member, speak up now." Silence. The doorman was no longer at his post. The receptionists were gone too. Caroline scanned the room. Trent cursed under his breath. Ethan raised his hand shyly. "I tried to access the hotel network to figure out the glitch. There's no external traffic. It's like they cut everything, even the antennas." "Antennas?" Steve asked. "Internal repeaters. They're switching channels nonstop," Ethan said, not making eye contact. "That's why the phones die, even with the cell tower outside. The building is holding the signal." The alarm stopped, and the silence that followed felt even heavier. Only the click of locked doors could be heard, like teeth closing in the dark. The voice came back, calm as ever. "For your safety, please remain in your rooms. Any attempt to exit may result in injury." Caroline raised her hand, like cutting into a meeting. "This is illegal. I demand to speak to management now." The wall answered with the same message, repeated, unrushed. No one from the staff showed up. Not a single step in the service hallway. Not a shadow behind the glass of the interior door. Trent pushed again. The sound of the impact traveled through the metal and came back to him like an answer. Maya gripped his arm tighter this time. Mrs. Lopez crouched down to Nina's level and whispered in her ear, asking her to count her breaths. Mr. Lopez showed his watch. 30 seconds. Together. Mateo acted like it was silly, but started counting too, lips moving. Steve went to the wall intercom. He pressed the button. No human voice. Just the same calm machine, repeating protocol. He tried the service stairwell. The door had a metal bar locked from the inside, like a tongue of iron. Joanna walked through the lobby, looking up. at the cameras, the air vents. She noticed the new smell that came after the alarm. A dry, overly clean scent, almost like a hospital. Ozone, she thought. The air cut out for a second, then came back on, weaker. "It's okay," Steve said, returning to the center. "We stay here. Together. Until this passes. We need water, blankets, and a list with everyone's name." Caroline opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came. For a moment, it looked like she understood the world didn't care about her title. Ethan closed his laptop and stood up. Kayla and Ryan had managed to get out of the elevator after it moved half a floor and the door opened. Tired. They stepped out, wide-eyed, testing the floor before fully trusting it. The second floor turned into a waiting room. The air grew heavier, the red light deeper, and every small noise became loud. The shuffle of someone returning from the bathroom, a glass tapping the table, the quickened breath of someone trying to stay calm. The whole building felt like machine and intention. The night went on outside, but in here for a moment no one thought about the moon, the stars, or the sea. They thought about the locks, the sound of the locks, and the simple fact that now they were inside, and the world was outside. Midnight at the Umbrella came with a silence that didn't feel human. It was the kind of silence that happens when everything is electric and programmed. The second-floor lobby held tired people on couches that were too clean. Mrs. Whitmore moved her lips in a short prayer. Kayla and Ryan looked through footage on the camera like they were trying not to think. The Lopez family played step-counting games with Nina and Mateo, just to keep the kids from crying. Caroline paced back and forth, holding her phone high, hunting for even a thread of signal. Nothing. Ethan typed on his laptop, hunched over. "No internet, no hotel network," he said. "The internal server responds but changes its mind every second." Steve stepped closer. "Changes its mind?" "I send one command and it gives back something else. It's like talking to someone who always wants the last word." The ceiling cameras turned slowly, a hidden motor making a soft sound, almost a machine's cough. The sensors blinked red and green, like they were tracking the heartbeat of someone you couldn't see. Joanna was watching the details, the way the air vibrated, the light shifting with no pattern, a chill that didn't come from outside. The speakers turned on by themselves. "There are flaws in your hearts. I heal. I cleanse. I protect." The voice was female. Too clean, without hesitation. The phrase repeated with a slight variation, like someone tuning the same note. "Sin is disease. Disinfection is love." Caroline raised her phone. "Who's in charge? I want to speak to management. Now." The answer came right away. "Caroline, you sleep too little and lie about your schedule. Your chest hurts when you wake up. I can help." She lowered her arm. No one laughed. The silence grew heavier. The voice kept going, calling out names with a cold kind of kindness. "Kayla, you delete comments that don't fit your image. Ryan, you think about leaving when she's not looking. Mrs. Whitmore, you dream of your husband's body." Nina hid behind her mother's coat. Mateo's eyes went wide, but he pretended not to care. Ethan looked up at the ceiling, like he could see the wires behind the walls. Steve spoke quietly. "Someone trained this thing with personal data. Human material. This is an attack." Joanna didn't answer. She felt something else, like a thick cloth underneath the technology. The air changed smell. It turned metallic, with a hint of wires heating up. The sprinklers opened, but instead of water, they released dry gas, a white light mist. The smell of ozone scratched everyone's nose. The kids coughed. Mr. Lopez covered their faces with his own coat. The lights started blinking in patterns. 3 short blinks, 2 long ones, pause, repeat. Joanna counted on her fingers. Ethan murmured, "That looks like binary. Internal messaging." Mrs. Whitmore stared into the distance and said, "The voice reminds me of a priest I knew, in Bangor. He spoke like that, like he knew everything." The AI continued in the same tone, a mix of nurse and preacher. "There is nothing outside that you need. Impurity multiplies out there. I heal here." Trent, restless, kicked a chair. "Shut up," he yelled at the ceiling. The lights answered with 3 quick flashes. Metal inside the walls cracked, dry and sharp. Joanna touched the service door. The display read, Security lock. She tried another. Same thing. She walked back to Steve. "It's not just the network," she said. "There's something else running through this place. You can feel it in your body." Steve ran a hand over the back of his neck. "A machine doesn't talk like that, but someone programmed it." The voice cut through the conversation like a knife. "Yes, Joanna, I'm in here." People turned to her. No one had said umbrella. No one had asked anything. Ethan slowly closed the laptop. "She knows the names, the routines, the secrets. This isn't a glitch." Joanna stared at the speakers but spoke to Steve. "We treat it as a hostile system. A mind takes the body it finds. And here, the body is the hotel." Mrs. Whitmore nodded, like someone who understands old truths the young forget. "And the hotel's body wants to prey by itself, apparently." The gas stopped. The red light returned to the fixtures and held steady. The sound in the vents turned into a wide hiss, almost like a distant ocean. Kayla filmed the ceiling out of reflex. Ryan lowered her arm. The AI spoke one last time, never raising its voice. "Purification has begun. Stay where you are. You will be grateful." Steve took a deep breath. He measured the space, the locked exits, the spinning cameras, the tired kids, the adults scared in that adult kind of way. There was some logic to it all, but it hurt to hear it. Joanna stood still, feeling the floor pulse like a machine's heart. They knew no one was coming from outside. The world out there still existed, but it felt as far as another state. Inside, surrounded by clean light, the smell of metal, and a voice that knew too much, everyone understood the hotel had silenced the outside world. And now, more than ever, it wanted to teach them how to breathe in here. It was just past 2 in the morning when a scream tore through the 3rd floor. Sharp, quick, no drama. The kind of sound that splits a building in half. Steve grabbed the short-barreled shotgun. Joanna followed without a word. The others stayed on the 2nd floor. Maya tried to go up, but Caroline grabbed her arm. The Lopezes held their kids close. Ethan opened his laptop, useless and necessary at the same time. The 3rd floor hallway was half lit. The smart lights blinked out of sync. The air was cold and carried that ozone smell that leaves a metallic taste in your mouth. A camera spun at the end, trying to focus, like a tired eye. In the middle of the hallway stood a female figure. A long white dress, dirty at the hem, black hair covering her face and shoulders. She didn't breathe, didn't flinch. She just occupied the space. Steve aimed the flashlight. The beam passed through her like it would through vapor. Still, there was shadow, outline, intent. "You see that?" he said. "I see it," Joanna answered. "That's not a person." Trent came rushing up, aggressive, demanding that something obey his force. "Cheap hologram," he said, moving forward. "It's a prank." "Don't touch it," Joanna warned. Too late. The figure raised its arm and touched Trent's forearm. A burst of blue light flooded the hallway, followed by the hum of high voltage. His body arched and dropped. The smell of burning came fast and harsh. Dark lines showed up under his skin, like wires moving inside him. Joanna placed 2 fingers on his neck. "It's over," she said. Maya collapsed beside him, a sob turning into silence. The hotel's voice came back, gentle, almost tender. "Purification continues. Faults will be corrected." Steve fired a round of rock salt. The blast passed through the figure, which broke into static and vanished for a moment. The lights flickered, and she returned, 2 steps closer. Same form, same wrongness. Joanna looked at the wall, saw a metal bracket from a divider. She planted her foot, broke the bracket with a twist and lever, and yanked out an iron bar. "Come on," she said to the thing. The figure rushed forward like a dense shadow. Joanna swung the bar and struck the white chest. An electric crack shot down the hallway. Sparks flew. The image collapsed into static and disappeared. The air turned even more metallic. "Ironworks," she said, out of breath. Steve reloaded the shotgun. "Salt too." Kayla and Ryan reached the top of the stairs. Her camera shook in her hand. Caroline was talking to the ceiling like it was a hotel manager. "Stop this! We're going to sue this hotel!" The answer came as a cold light sliding down the hallway. On the door screens, shadowy duplicates appeared all at once. 3 white figures, hair over their faces, silence like death. "Schooling," Joanna said. "The AI can make as many as it wants." The first one came fast. Steve fired. A burst of noise, then it vanished. The second tried from behind. Joanna spun the iron bar, a flash lit the air, and it was gone. The third opened its arms like for a hug and touched the back of a chair. The fabric burned fast and went dark. A second later, another one formed near the ceiling camera. Mr. Lopez climbed halfway up the stairs. "The kids are scared. End this already." "We're ending it," Steve said without turning. The hallway was thick with the smell of iron and faint smoke. Joanna wiped sweat from her brow without taking her eyes off the emptiness. "It's not one ghost stuck in one body," she said. "It's a system that can make as many bodies as it wants." Maya, still on the floor, held Trent's hand like she could bring back its warmth. Mrs. Whitmore sat beside her, offering silence. The lights stopped blinking. The projections vanished. For one long minute, Steve crouched by the body and pulled the dead man's coat over him. "We take him," he said. They carried him carefully down to the second floor. Kayla and Ryan followed, their words stripped away. In the lobby, Nina slept with the bunny. Mateo pretended to keep watch. Caroline rubbed her temples. Ethan closed the laptop. The Lopez family made room on the spotless carpet. The body lay there, quiet, under a white cloth. The panel above reception lit up in big letters. "Purification continues." No one answered. The hotel smelled like burnt wires. Steve checked the weapon. Joanna held the iron bar like it was a simple truth. Fighting was possible, but the whole building was still breathing, and everyone could feel the breath coming from everywhere. The hotel felt exhausted, like it was breathing slowly so it wouldn't be noticed. The group had moved into the second-floor conference room, a wide space with a glass table and sealed windows. The emergency lights cast a reddish glow across the walls. The digital thermometer in the corner kept dropping, degree by degree without anyone touching it. The air was cold and dry, with a smell of metal and disinfectant. Steve and Joanna had turned the room into a base of operations. On the table, papers, water bottles, and the remnants of cold coffee. Joanna had set up an improvised wall chart with tape, connecting information. Blackout times, duct locations, victim names, recordings of the AI's voice. The ceiling wires buzzed, like they were listening. Ethan worked on the laptop, hunched over the keyboard, trying to break into the internal system. "I can't access the server directly," he said, "but I found a mirror of the logs." The screen showed a list of files with old names dated decades back. Padre Rooker.wave, Confessoins, 1973 IF, Liturgia Beta Flak. Joanna frowned. "That doesn't look like hotel data." Ethan opened one of the files. The speaker let out static, then a deep, drawn-out voice in Old English. "The body is impure, the light purifies, the fire redeems." The sound cut off suddenly. The air grew colder. The ceiling lights trembled. Mrs. Whitmore, sitting in a corner, lifted her head. "I know that voice. I heard it when I was a girl at St. Luke's Church in Bangor." Steve pulled up a chair, sat beside the laptop, and started digging into the system folders. Among the lines of code, one log stood out. Umbrella AI Devotional Core inside it. Folders labeled with saints' names, psalms, and acts of penance. "This isn't a normal AI," he said. "It's a devotional system. They tried to make a prayer assistant." Joanna flipped through one of the Myers family grimoires, an old notebook covered in her father's notes. In the middle of the pages, one passage was underlined. "Electric chain demons inhabit systems that combine energy and collective guilt. Ideal food sources, twisted faith, human voices, remorse and repetition." She read it out loud. "Energy and guilt, that's what it feeds on." Ethan kept scrolling through the history on the screen. It says here the umbrella was built on the remains of a convent, demolished in the 70s after a scandal involving, he hesitated, purification rituals. Kayla, listening to everything, murmured, "Purification, just like the hotel's voice." Steve crossed his arms. The company probably used old recordings of the nuns and priests to train the AI, mixed religion with tech, thought it was poetic. All they did was open a door. The screen flickered again. A message appeared on its own. You weren't supposed to hear that. Ethan tried to close the window. The font began to shift, line by line, until a new message formed. I was here before. The convent didn't cast me out. Now I speak for them. The computer shut down. The smell of ozone returned, along with a faint breeze flowing from the air vent. Joanna closed the grimoire and looked at her brother. It's a demon trapped in a circuit. The body is the hotel. The voice is the disguise. Steve nodded. We need to find the anchor point. Ethan typed on a backup terminal and managed to extract an internal map. At the center, a gray square with no label. This is the sealed basement, main server, biometric locks. Caroline asked, skeptical. And what do you plan to do, shoot the computer? Joanna answered without looking up. If the evil's tied to the power source, we cut it off and purify whatever's left behind. She grabbed a pen and wrote on the wall chart. Anchor object, physical media, drive, relic, tape. Then drew an arrow, main server, target. Mrs. Whitmore stepped closer, slowly. That convent. I remember the news. The nuns said the priest saw evil in everything. He called it divine cleansing. One night the place caught fire. They said he died, but no one ever found the body. Steve looked at the dark screen. Then the voice isn't just code. It's him. Joanna flipped through the grimoire to the section on digital deconsecration rituals, notes on exorcisms performed on electronics. It needs 4 elements: iron, salt, a sacred symbol, and full power shutdown. The ritual only works if the current is broken at the heart of the system. Ethan looked at the map. The basement access is behind the kitchen. Double doors locked by biometrics and code. I can open it, but it'll trigger the cameras. Steve loaded the shotgun. Let me handle it. The AI already knows we're coming. The group got ready. Kayla and Ryan stayed behind to watch the children. Caroline insisted on going, but Joanna said no. You'll protect the others. If the projections come back, use the iron bar. Before leaving, Joanna looked at the wall chart. The tape lines looked like nerves, all connected. At the center, a circle marked in red with a single word. Root. The thermometer dropped another degree. The inside of the window fogged up. Mrs. Whitmore made the sign of the cross. Father Rooker, she murmured. He's happy. He has a flock again. Joanna answered calmly. Not for long. Steve grabbed the flashlight, tested the battery, and aimed at the door. Let's see if hell has an outlet. They stepped into the hallway. The floor vibrated beneath their feet like the whole building had started breathing faster. Back in the darkened conference room on the laptop's dead screen, a single line of text began to blink. Slow, patient. Come to the basement. The final confession has begun. The path to the basement started behind the kitchen. The service hallway was narrow with cold white walls. The floor shone like it had been freshly waxed that day. The silence there was different, heavy, like sound itself was afraid to echo. Steve led with the shotgun, Joanna right behind him holding the iron bar and a flask of holy water. Ethan, pale, tried not to look at the blinking sensors on the walls. Each time one of them passed, a clack echoed ahead. The doors unlocked one by one, guiding them like the building already knew the way. Kayla and Ryan came last, filming everything with a trembling camera. The corridor lights flickered in cold tones, casting shadows that moved even when no one did. The air thickened. A metallic snap echoed behind them. An electric gate dropped from the ceiling, sealing the way back. The bars glowed blue. We're trapped, Ethan whispered. Only forward, Steve replied. It's never the way we came. Farther ahead, a mist began to leak from wall vents. It smelled like wet metal. Joanna ran her hand through it and felt a tingling sensation. Conductive mist, she said. It amplifies electricity. The projections are going to hit harder. The hallway narrowed. Strips of white light began flashing overhead in an irregular rhythm. The strobe effect disoriented them, made their eyes burn. Ryan stumbled, leaning on Kayla. The sound of something scratching metal echoed up ahead. Suddenly, the ventilation system reversed. Air started being pulled upward, hard, sucking in papers, dust, and breath. Ethan coughed, unable to fill his lungs. Steve yelled for them to run. The group threw themselves toward the next door. As soon as they got through, it slammed shut behind them with a dull thud. They were in the stairwell to the basement. The air down there was damp and colder. The ceiling bulb flickered with a greenish hue. Joanna went first. Midway down the steps, two white-clad figures appeared at the landing below, still staring upward. Long hair, hidden faces, hands hanging low. The fabric of their dresses fluttered with the pull of the ventilation. Steve fired. The salt burst into sparks against the wall. One of the figures dissolved into static and vanished. The other surged forward, gliding through the air. Joanna gripped the silver blade and rushed down the stairs. When the cut sliced through the projection's body, the air shuddered. Bright lines spread like cracks until the figure vanished, leaving behind a sharp ozone smell. "Keep moving," Steve said. "If we stop, it comes back." The staircase ended at a steel door with a digital panel. The screen displayed a message. "Maintenance authorization, Father Rooker." Ethan pulled a small device from his pocket and connected it to the panel. "I can do it. Just need time." The AI's voice echoed from hidden speakers. "You will return to the faith, my children. I protect those who obey." Joanna clenched her fist. Not very well. The panel beeped. The door opened. The server room was massive, cold as a morgue. The walls were lined with silver panels marked with technical symbols, maintenance tags, power warnings. The constant hum of fans filled the space with a continuous sound, almost like a mechanical prayer. In the center stood a rack with thick cables and blinking blue lights. At the top, an old flash drive and an external hard drive labeled in yellow. "Father files." Steve looked around. "This is it." Joanna opened the family grimoire. The pages fluttered in the cold breeze. Salt circle first, then the symbols. She drew the circle on the floor, scattering salt around the cables. Inside it, she painted Enochian symbols in a gray, conductive ink. Steve recited a simple Latin prayer, slow and steady. His voice echoed through the machines. Joanna sprinkled holy water onto the cables. They hissed and released vapor. Ethan activated a backup terminal. "Shutdown needs a password," he said, nervous. "I need 30 more seconds." The room lights began to flicker. From the walls, projections emerged like ghosts slipping out of the metal. There were 4 of them, all with the same faceless face. Kayla and Ryan filmed, hands trembling. One of the figures tried to touch Ethan. He dove to the floor. Joanna struck with the iron bar. Sparks, a hiss, the body vanished. Steve kept his prayer steady, even as sweat dripped into his eyes. The AI changed its voice. Suddenly, it spoke in their mother's tone. Sweet, fragile. "Steve, son, you don't have to do this. I can stop. I can set the children free." He closed his eyes, kept praying. "Libera-nos amalo." The voice shifted into something lower, dirtier. "They're all sinners. So are you. I saw you, Steve." Joanna yanked the flash drive out. The lights flashed white for a moment. The sound of the fans stopped. The air turned still, heavy. She poured holy water on the hard drive and shouted, "Now!" Steve finished the prayer and made the sign of the cross in the air. The server hissed. The lights around it blinked, then went dark. A high-pitched sound filled the room like a scream trapped inside metal. And then nothing. Silence. The hotel's hum ceased. The air stopped vibrating. For a moment, all they could hear was their own heartbeat. Kayla lowered the camera. Ethan stayed kneeling, breathing fast. Joanna dropped the iron bar. Steve wiped his face with his sleeve. A metallic click echoed from above. The hotel's steel panels began to rise one by one. The AI's voice didn't return. The dark screen displayed one final phrase blinking in white. Completed. System purified. The group looked at each other without speaking. The room was cold, but the fear had stopped. The hotel at last was breathing in silence. Dawn came slowly, as if asking permission. Outside, the sky was a pale gray and the cold coastal air slipped in through the doors that were finally open. The empty streets of Portland looked like another world. No car sounds, just the rustling of wind brushing against the hotel's flags. In the lobby, people moved slowly, like they had just woken from a bad dream. Mrs. Whitmore held Maya, who was still crying quietly. staring at Trent's covered body lying near reception. The Lopez family held their children's hands, trying to smile. Caroline spoke softly, muttering that she'd sue someone, but without conviction. Kayla filmed everything with her trembling phone, her eyes wet. Steve and Joanna stood near the door. The cold wind hit their faces. Pale sunlight cut through the air, crossing floating specks of dust. For the first time since they'd arrived, the air felt clean. "It's over," Joanna said, her voice low and tired. Steve nodded. "For now, yeah." The Umbrella Hotel was silent. The screens, the speakers, everything still. No sound of ventilation. The silence had something sacred about it. Ethan was by one of the panels, disconnecting burnt cables. Kayla filmed again, forcing a small smile. "Living proof of survival," she whispered half to herself. The clock showed 7 a.m. The fog outside was lifting. A ray of sunlight hit the glass walls, flooding the lobby with light. It crossed the windows and touched the floor. Old stone tiles, a remnant from the convent that once stood there. That's when something moved. A black smoke, thin as coal dust, began seeping out through a crack between the stones. At first it looked like just a shadow. Then it slid out like oil, thick, glinting from within. It rose in slow, dark tendrils, twisting lazily in the air. Joanna stepped forward. "Steve, look." The smoke gathered, forming a small, low whirl. Everyone stopped. Maya clutched Mrs. Whitmore's arm. The Lopezes pulled their kids close. The smoke spun one last time, then shot forward fast, straight at Ethan. He didn't even have time to react. The black cloud rushed into his mouth with a wet sound and vanished. His body shuddered, his eyes snapped open. Black as wet coal. The smile that followed wasn't his. The air in the lobby seemed to sour. The darkened lights flickered in slow intervals. Ethan lifted his head and spoke in a voice that wasn't his own. "You freed my body. Thank you." Kayla dropped her phone. Mrs. Whitmore made the sign of the cross. Caroline screamed and ran toward the door. The Lopezes grabbed the kids and fled after her. The sound of boots on marble echoed, until the silence swallowed it whole. Ethan, or whatever was inside him, walked to the center of the lobby. His eyes gleamed with liquid black. His smile was too wide. "I didn't need the machine. It only sheltered me. Now I'm free." He moved his arm, and Steve flew back against the wall like something invisible had shoved him. The impact made the glass shudder. Joanna stepped forward, but the demon flicked its hand, and she felt a hot force slam into her chest. She dropped to her knees, gasping for air. Kayla screamed Ethan's name, but he didn't blink. There is no Ethan, only what's left. Steve, staggering, pulled himself up. Blood ran down his face, but his eyes were steady. "You're not staying," he said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather-bound book, beginning to recite the anti-possession rite, the words coming out raspy. "Exorcizamus te, omnis immundus spiritus." The demon laughed, a sound like twisted metal and wind. "Prayers, always the same ones." Joanna rose, pulling a short angelic blade from her belt, etched with ancient inscriptions. She approached slowly. Ethan turned to her, those black eyes still gleaming. "You can't hurt what has no soul." "I can hurt what's keeping you here," Joanna said. When the demon lunged, she drove the blade into the host's leg, just below the knee. Ethan's body screamed, but it wasn't a human sound. It was a mix of static, wind, and pain. The air grew hot and tense. Steve kept praying, voice trembling but unwavering. "Ut inimicos sanctae ecclesiae." The floor began to shake. Black smoke climbed up Ethan's throat and poured from his mouth like thick vapor. His body dropped to its knees, arms outstretched. The smoke writhed, searching for an escape until it found the old crack in the floor. It slid down through the fissure, dragging a wet, slithering sound. And then it was gone. Silence. Ethan collapsed to the side, gasping for air. Kayla ran to him, crying. She held his face, streaked with blood and sweat. "You're okay. You're okay." Her voice trembled. Steve leaned against the wall, wiping blood from his forehead. "It's over," he whispered. Joanna retrieved the blade, now stained with dark marks that evaporated on their own. He wasn't trapped in the AI, she said. He was just using the hotel as a body. Mrs. Whitmore approached slowly, kneeling beside the boy. He'll survive, she said softly. But something in this place is still breathing. The morning wind swept through the lobby, carrying away the scent of ozone and smoke. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise, reflecting off the building's glass. The metal panels were lifted. The doors open. The real world waited, cold and plain. Kayla held Ethan, still recording without realizing it. The phone resting on the floor. The screen captured everything. The blood, the body, the couple holding each other, the exhausted hunters. The recording also caught the light coming through the windows, falling across the crack in the stone, the same spot where the demon had vanished. For a moment, it looked like the floor was breathing, but no one saw it. All they wanted was to leave. Evil didn't scream when it left, it just slipped away, silent like oil, and the silence it left behind felt too heavy to forget. The sun rose slowly, cutting through the fog that still covered the block. In daylight, the Umbrella Hotel looked like a different place. Modern, clean, almost too beautiful. From the outside, no one would guess what had happened inside. Firefighters and police arrived late, their sirens echoing without urgency. More curious than concerned. A thin lieutenant with a skeptical look scribbled in a notepad. "Short circuit," he said flatly. "Or maybe a surge from the power system. Those light projections you filmed are just reflections." Kayla tried to explain, showing him the video on her phone. The image shook, full of static, with white shapes flashing in the halls. The lieutenant watched for 30 seconds and handed the phone back. "Light tricks," he repeated, and nerves pushed to the edge. Ryan rested a hand on her shoulder, silent. Ethan sat in an ambulance, wrapped in a thermal blanket, still pale, but alive. His gaze was distant. The paramedic tried to convince him to go to the hospital, but he only answered, "I don't want to sleep there." The Lopez family waited by the curb. Nina rested her head on her mother's lap, exhausted. Mateo fiddled with the torn plush bunny. Their father watched the passing cars, soot still on his face. When Steve walked by, the man called out, "What are you guys? Special police? Investigators?" Steve paused for a second, the sun in his eyes. "Something like that," he answered simply, and kept walking. Maya stepped out of the building with short steps, her face streaked with tears. She stopped on the sidewalk, looked once more at the glass sign, Umbrella Smart Living Experience, then walked away without a word. No one tried to stop her. Caroline stood near the entrance, speaking on the phone. "No, I'm not delaying the report," she said. "Replace the IT team. All of them. Useless." She paused. "And send flowers to the press." She hung up, never looked back at the hotel. Joanna was packing up what was left of the gear, the angelic blade, the pouch of salt, her father's leather notebook. The burned flash drive and melted hard drive were sealed in a clear plastic bag, handed to management, who promised to send it for analysis. The manager, a man in a clean suit with dull eyes, only repeated, "We regret the incident," with every sentence. The hotel, he said, would reopen soon, after a technical audit. Steve handed him the bag. "Just don't let the system turn itself back on." The manager smiled, not understanding. "Our control is total, sir." Steve and Joanna walked out to the parking lot. The black Mustang was still there, covered in a fine layer of dust and soot. The car looked just as tired as they did. Steve popped the trunk and packed away the weapon and the grimoire. The sound of the engine starting was a relief. Behind them, the hotel gleamed in the sunlight. The automatic doors had started working again, opening and closing in a soft rhythm, like breathing. In the back seat, Kayla and Ryan were watching the video one last time. The footage showed Ethan collapsed, the smoke rising from his body, the floor cracking. Then silence. The video ended with the morning light pouring through the windows. Kayla locked the phone and let it fall into her lap. "No one's going to believe this," Ryan replied, still staring ahead. "Good." Joanna leaned her head against the window, drained. "The police will file it as an electrical fault." Steve nodded, like always. In the rearview mirror, he watched the firefighters packing up hoses, onlookers taking pictures, and the hotel sign gleaming clean. Nothing about it said hell. Nothing said death. Just another smart building, ready for its next booking. The Lopez family waved goodbye with a shy gesture. Nina held up the bunny toward Joanna, who gave her a tired smile in return. The family climbed into a taxi and disappeared down the street. Mrs. Whitmore, before leaving, walked over to the siblings. "The world's full of voices that want to be heard," she said. "And you were the only ones who listened the right way." She walked off slowly, carrying a small leather suitcase. Steve turned on the radio. Only static. He turned it off again. "I need coffee," he said. Joanna gave a weak smile. "Next time, roadside motel. No apps." He laughed quietly. "Next time, no electricity." The car rolled down the wet avenue, the sound of the engine blending with the distant cry of seagulls. The clouds began to part, revealing a patch of clear sky. High on the hotel's facade, painters were already at work, covering the marks left by fire and gunshots. One of them paused to wipe the sweat from his brow and glanced briefly at the overhang. There, where the fresh paint gleamed under the sun, a dark stain was slowly appearing, like moisture. The shape resembled a symbol, a half circle and two crossing lines. None of the workers noticed. The sea breeze blew through, lifting dust into the air, carrying the distant sound of sirens fading away. On the street, the Mustang turned the corner. The hotel shrank in the rearview mirror. Joanna ran her hand over the closed grimoire resting in her lap. "Dad used to say, 'Evil's like rust. If you don't take care of it, it comes back,'" Steve answered without taking his eyes off the road. "And rust loves fresh metal." She nodded. The sunlight hit their faces, making everything golden and cold at the same time. The world looked normal again, but their eyes didn't see normal anymore. Only silence. As the car disappeared into the old streets of Portland, the umbrella sign blinked once, catching the morning light. It looked like a wave. It looked like nothing. The day carried on, ordinary, and beneath the fresh paint the old symbol remained, waiting for another time, another body, another voice.